The steelhead trout is truly the glamour fish for freshwater fly fishers. The tributaries of the Great Lakes have developed into a primary destination for steelhead anglers, with substantial runs of both wild and stock fish available throughout the region. Catching one of these large trout on a fly they made themselves represents a milestone in the career of many fly tyers. The flies used to catch steelhead in Great Lakes tributary streams are as varied as the waters are. From the small streams of New York and Pennsylvania to the brawling rivers of Michigan and Ontario, numerous fly patterns have proven effective to fool these wandering trout. Local favorite patterns may vary greatly from region to region. In their first video, Steelheading Made Simple, Brian Flechsig and Jerry Darkus presented a fly fishing method that has proven productive to catch steelhead throughout the Great Lakes. In Cool Flies for Hot Fish, Brian and Jerry show us how to tie a series of fly patterns that are consistent steelhead producers throughout the region. The patterns presented are all simple to tie, and best of all, will catch fish. Some of these flies may be familiar to you, others may not. Regional variations of these patterns will be discussed. The beginning fly tyer will find a wealth of information. The accomplished tyer will learn some different twists to familiar patterns and ways to make more durable, effective flies for Great Lakes steelhead. Brian Flechsig, a lifelong fly angler, is an accomplished fly tyer and instructor. He has taught hundreds of students the art of fly tying over the last decade. From his base in Columbus, Ohio, Brian operates one of the Midwest's largest fly fishing, outfitting, and guiding services. Jerry Darkus brings over 30 years' experience to the fly tying bench. He has extensive experience fly fishing throughout the Great Lakes region. A noted angler and author, Jerry has had articles published in a variety of publications, such as American Angler, Fly Tyer, Midwest Fly Fishing, and Wild Steelhead and Salmon.
Well, howdy friends, and welcome to Cool Flies for Hot Fish. In this tape, we're going to show you some simple but effective flies for fishing the Great Lakes tributaries.
You know, when you fish these Great Lakes streams, you have a tendency to lose a lot of flies just for the different styles of fishing that are used. So one of the things that we look at when we try and tie flies for this fishery is we want flies that are fairly simple to tie, use materials that are easily obtained and yet quick to tie and effective to catch fish. What we're going to go through is a series of fly patterns for you. We're going to do some eggs and attractors, some nymph patterns, and some streamers. And these are all patterns that have proven to be effective throughout the whole Great Lakes region.
So sit back, relax, enjoy the tape, and we hope you learn a little something along the way.
You know, the heart of any good steelhead fly pattern is the hook. And here in the Great Lakes, we use a lot of different styles of flies, so we need to tie on different styles of hooks.
But you know, you spend all this money on good quality equipment. You've got the right rod, you've got the right leader formula. You take the time to go through all this, so it just makes common sense to use the best hook, really, that you can afford.
Now, what you want to get is a chemically sharpened hook. They're made by several different companies, and some of the more recognized names would be Daiichi, Tiemco, Dairiki, even Mustad has a line of chemically sharpened hooks now. And there's a few really well-recognized styles of hooks that are used a lot. For example, the Daiichi 1530 is one of the more universally used hooks throughout the area.
I agree with you there. I tie almost, an amazing amount of my steelhead flies on the 1530. I tie almost all my nymphs on it, as well as a lot of egg patterns like the sucker spawn. It's a great hook for that. Another hook that's really well recognized for egg patterns is the Tiemco 105. Perfect egg hook, it's hard to beat, especially for the Glo Bugs and such. For my nymph patterns, I'll use sometimes also the curved nymph hook like the Tiemco 2457 or the Daiichi 1120. Another hook worth mentioning is Jim Teeney's custom fly hooks. They're relatively inexpensive and they're almost indestructible, and you can tie nymphs on them, you tie teeny flies on them, and some streamer and flash patterns on them. It's a good hook. But as we go through this video, we will recommend individual hook styles for these individual patterns, but don't be afraid to experiment on those as well.
What it boils down to is use the best hook that you can get, you're going to hook more fish, you're going to land more fish, and they're just really a good investment. You know, some of the best known and most used steelhead patterns in the Great Lakes are egg patterns. These are generally simple flies that are tied to imitate the eggs from salmon or trout. There's a wide variety of egg patterns that can be used, and we're just going to sit down here today and show you a few simple ones. And the first one I'm going to start out with is the Glo Bug. You know, the Glo Bug is one of the simplest steelhead fly patterns there is to tie, and probably a lot of us caught our first steelhead on a Glo Bug. It's a pattern that originated many years ago on the West Coast and was probably one of the original egg patterns that was ever made. But I'm surprised that as I go around and give classes and demonstrations, and that I'm always asked by people, how do you tie a Glo Bug? People have a lot of difficulty with it. So let's sit down here and tie one today, and hopefully we'll make it simple for you. The hook I'm going to use here on this fly is the Tiemco 105. It's a heavy wire, short shank hook with a very good point on it, and it's just a well-suited fly or hook for this style of fly. Now, we want to use a fairly heavy thread when we tie this fly because we have to put a lot of pressure on it. What I've got here is a Gouda Brod G. It's a strong thread with quite a bit of diameter to it. And when I start this fly, I'm just going to, again, wrap back over my thread and have the starting point right about on the center of the hook shank. We're going to trim off the excess thread here. You know, the body of this fly is made from a material called egg yarn or Glo Bug yarn. And what this stuff is a heavy polypropylene yarn, almost like rope actually. It comes in a wide range of colors, and there's a few standard ones that we use. Probably one of the favorite colors and is used extensively is a cheese or an Oregon cheese. It's a yellowish color, and it's a great imitation you know, for salmon and trout eggs. So the first step in making this fly is going to be just really cutting a few strands of this rope about an inch and a half in length. And the scissors I use when I work with Glo Bugs is basically I go to a discount store or something and just get a pair of inexpensive craft scissors, because this yarn is really tough, and if you use your good fly tying scissors on it, it's going to create problems for you. Now, depending on hook size is going to determine how many clumps of yarn that I use. On smaller size hooks like an 8 or 10, I typically use 2 clumps of yarn. On a bigger hook, a 4 or 6, I'd go up to 3 clumps of yarn. But this is a size 10 hook here. I've got 2 clumps of yarn, and the first step that I'm going to do is I'm going to lay these clumps of yarn right on top of the hook along the shank of the hook, hold them in place tightly. I'm going to take several loose wraps over the top of the yarn with my thread, and then pull it down tight, pretty much as hard as I can, or at least to, you know, within the breaking strength of the thread. Give it another good wrap to lash that down firmly on top of the hook. Now the next step that I'm going to do is just pull the yarn back a little bit, make a few wraps in front of it, pull the yarn forward, get a few wraps in front of it there, and pull these in nice and tight. Basically what we're doing here is we're packing the base of the yarn together. Then I'm going to pick this material up, and actually I'm going to do a circular wrap right around the base of the yarn, directly over the top of the shank of the hook. Do that 2 or 3 times. Pull that tight. Now I can bring the thread back up in front, a few wraps, use my whip finisher to tie it off. Couple turns. Okay. The thread's all secured. I'm going to trim the thread off close. And here we're going to trim the yarn. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this up tight straight overhead and make one straight cut across just above the hook shank. If I cut it up too high, I'm going to have a puff of yarn the size of a golf ball. So what I want to do is just cut that down fairly close. One straight shot across, fluff that around a little bit, and there's our basic Glo Bug. You know, some people like to add a little bit of a color spot onto their Glo Bugs. I guess it gives a little bit more natural look as far as like being an eyed egg, or at least it adds a color contrast to it. It just gives a little better look to it, and it's a pretty easy thing to do too. Again, once you get your yarn laid onto the hook, basically what I would do is take a contrasting color of yarn here, separate out a narrow section of it, trim that off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this contrasting color of yarn right on top of the two clumps, or right in between the two clumps that I already have tied down onto the hook. I'm going to give one wrap over those to kind of hold them into place. I'm going to pull the yarn back, make a wrap in front of it. Okay, now I'm going to pick this whole clump of stuff up, make my crisscross wraps, a couple each side. Again, this just holds the base of this yarn together so it flares out nice when we trim it. Again, I'm going to do my wrap directly around the base of the fly several times. Advance my thread forward. Throw in a few turns from a whip finish. Trim that off. And pick up my yarn cutting scissors, pull all this yarn up tight, and again make a nice quick straight cut right across there. Fluff that around a little bit, and again we've got our glow bug with the color spot.
If you like this video, hit subscribe. It helps out a lot. And check out these videos. We think you might like them too.